Every great story has missing pages. And the Bible, the most widely read, translated, and interpreted book in human history, is no exception. But what if I told you that entire books were removed from its pages? That there once existed gospels, prophecies, and ancient revelations so dangerous, so disruptive, they were locked away. Not by accident, but by design. This isn't just about faith. It's about control. Because the one who controls the narrative controls the mind. Before we begin, take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We go deep into what's been buried, banned, and forgotten, and there's much more they don't want you to see. Now, let's begin. Section 1. The counsel that chose what you'd never read. The Bible as we know it today wasn't handed down from the clouds. It was assembled, edited, voted on, and in some cases, sanitized. Much of this happened in the early centuries of Christianity, most notably at the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. A group of bishops and Roman officials, under the watchful eye of Emperor Constantine, decided which texts would be canon and which would be cast into the shadows. Some books didn't support the growing church structure. Others contradicted established doctrine. A few gave too much power to the individual reader. They were labeled heretical, dangerous, false. But many of them were once widely read and revered by early Christians. The question is, what was so threatening that it had to be erased? Let's look at 7 of the most important forbidden books that they don't want you to read. Book 1, the Book of Enoch, fallen angels, giants, and secret knowledge. Before the Great Flood, before Noah's Ark, there was Enoch. The Book of Enoch tells the story of a world corrupted not by man but by angels. These celestial beings, called the Watchers, descended to earth, took human wives, and gave birth to the Nephilim, giants with unholy strength and forbidden knowledge. They taught mankind metallurgy, sorcery, astrology, things humanity wasn't meant to know. According to Enoch, this was the reason for the flood, not sin, but contamination. Early Christians, including church fathers and possibly even Jesus, were familiar with this book. So why was it banned? Because it portrayed a cosmic rebellion, a hidden war between heaven and earth. It blurred the line between myth, religion, and science, and it raised a terrifying possibility that we were tampered with. Book 2, the Gospel of Thomas, Finding God Without a Church. What if you didn't need a priest, a church, or even scripture to reach God? The Gospel of Thomas is a collection of secret sayings attributed to Jesus, but these teachings are different, deeper, stranger, more mystical. Split a piece of wood and I am there, lift a stone and you will find me. There are no miracles, no resurrection story, just direct spiritual insight. It teaches that divinity lives within, that salvation comes from self-knowledge, not rituals or institutions. To early Gnostics, this gospel was sacred. To church leaders, it was a threat to the system. Because if God lives inside you, what need is there for middlemen? Book 3, the Gospel of Mary, the woman who knew too much. We've all heard of Mary Magdalene, usually described as the reformed sinner, the prostitute saved by grace. But what if that version of her story wasn't just incomplete, but intentionally rewritten? The Gospel of Mary paints a radically different picture. In it, Mary isn't on the sidelines. She's not a cautionary tale. She's a spiritual teacher, a trusted confidant, a woman Jesus himself considered worthy of his deepest, most esoteric teachings. In this text, the disciples are confused after Jesus' death, fearful, divided, and it's Mary, not Peter, not James, who steps forward with clarity. She recounts what Christ revealed to her in private, a vision of the soul's journey, of ascending past earthly powers, of awakening through inner knowledge. But what happens next? Peter, outraged, questions why Jesus would speak such truth to a woman and not them. This gospel isn't just theological, it's political. It shows us a woman challenging religious hierarchy and being silenced for it. Sound familiar? In a world where institutional power has long depended on excluding female voices, this ancient text feels eerily modern. It echoes boardrooms, pulpits, and political chambers. Places where women still fight to be heard, still face suspicion when they lead, still carry labels they didn't write. By erasing Mary's gospel, the early church didn't just hide a perspective. They set a precedent. A precedent that spiritual authority is male, that revelation must come through men, and that the divine feminine is a threat, not a truth. But here's the twist. Mary's gospel was never truly lost. It resurfaced in fragments in the 19th century, broken but still breathing, and its return now, in this century, carries weight. Because in an age where people are questioning institutions, reclaiming forgotten history, and redefining who gets to speak for the sacred, Mary's voice matters more than ever. She represents a spiritual rebellion, one where truth isn't passed down from pulpits, but rises up from those who were told to stay quiet. She reminds us that what's buried isn't gone, and what's silenced often carries the most dangerous kind of power. The truth that doesn't need permission to be spoken. Book 4, the Book of Jubilees, Time, Law, and the Cycles of the Cosmos. Most people have never heard of the Book of Jubilees, but it once held great influence. It's essentially a retelling of Genesis and Exodus, but with a twist. Everything is structured in 49-year cycles, or Jubilees. It offers deeper timelines, additional stories of angels and fallen watchers, and reinforces cosmic law beyond just Mosaic commandments. It was preserved by the Essenes, an apocalyptic Jewish sect, and found among the Dead Sea Scrolls. Why was it cast out? Because it suggests a hidden calendar, a divine rhythm behind history, and that knowledge gives power. Power to see patterns others can't. Power to predict cycles of change. That kind of knowledge was never meant for the common man. Book 5, The Apocalypse of Peter, Hell Too Real to Print. Before Dante's Inferno, there was the Apocalypse of Peter. This was one of the earliest Christian texts to describe heaven and hell, but not in metaphor, in brutal, graphic detail. Sinners were punished in horrifyingly specific ways: the greedy, the corrupt, the unjust, all tormented in ways tailored to their crimes. Early Christians believed it, revered it. So why was it removed? Some say it was too terrifying. Others believe it was banned because it showed a level of justice the church itself couldn't live up to. The truth? It was too raw, too personal, and too hard to control. Book 6, the Book of Jasher, missing from the Bible, but mentioned in it. This one's different because it's hiding in plain sight. The Book of Jasher is referenced twice in the Bible, once in Joshua and once in 2 Samuel. Yet, the book itself doesn't appear in the canon. Why? Jasher is a retelling of biblical events with extra details, giants, extended genealogies, clues that suggest an alternate version of known history. Some scholars say it was fabricated later. Others believe it was deliberately left out because it contradicted the official timeline. Either way, it asks a troubling question. Why would the Bible reference a book and then remove it? Book 7, the Infancy Gospel of Thomas, the child Jesus they don't talk about. The final book may be the most unsettling. The Infancy Gospel of Thomas doesn't describe the crucifixion or resurrection. It tells the story of Jesus as a child with power, too much power. In this gospel, the young Jesus performs miracles, but also lashes out. He strikes a playmate dead. He blinds a neighbor. He learns painfully how to control divine force in human form. Is it myth, allegory, or truth too hard to accept? Church leaders called it apocryphal, dangerous, and false, but its existence raises a haunting possibility. That the divine might not always be gentle, and that the full story of Christ, human and divine, was too much for the official canon to handle. Section 2, Why They Were Banned, Truth That Couldn't Be Controlled. So why were these books banned? Why remove stories that claim to speak divine truth? Why bury them in the desert, label them heresy, or reduce them to footnotes in obscure theology textbooks? Because they all had something in common. They disrupted the narrative. They shifted power. The banned books of the Bible weren't just different. they were dangerous to those who depended on order, hierarchy, and unquestioned authority. Let's look at the patterns. They gave spiritual agency to the individual, not the institution. They acknowledged the divine feminine, a concept that threatened male-dominated religious orders. They spoke of hidden knowledge, gnosis, that could be accessed without clergy, church, or tithe. They offered alternate timelines, alternate cosmologies, and alternate versions of events considered settled truth. These weren't minor theological disagreements. They were existential threats to the religious and political structures being built in the early centuries after Christ. Because if people believed they could access divine truth themselves, why would they need priests? If women could carry and teach spiritual wisdom, why would they be excluded from positions of leadership? If Jesus had hidden teachings about inner knowledge and cosmic forces, what else might the church be hiding? The banned books cracked open the idea that truth is plural, not singular. That sacred knowledge wasn't just for the elite, but for anyone willing to seek it. And that made it uncontrollable. And if there's one thing history has taught us, it's that institutions don't fear lies. They fear truth they can't control. By controlling the canon, the early church didn't just shape theology, it shaped reality. It determined what was allowed to be believed, what was allowed to be questioned, what was allowed to be possible. And in doing so, it didn't just edit a book. It edited human consciousness. These forbidden books are a mirror, not just reflecting what the past tried to erase, but revealing what we've been trained not to see. Because every time a voice was silenced, every time a scroll was burned, every time a gospel was declared unholy, a door was closed, a question was left unasked, a piece of ourselves was buried with it. But now, centuries later, those doors are creaking open. And the questions, they're louder than ever. Section 3, the Dead Sea Scrolls, Library of the Erased. In 1947, a young Bedouin shepherd wandered into a cave near Qumran, just northwest of the Dead Sea. What he found would shake biblical scholarship to its core. Inside clay jars were thousands of ancient scroll fragments, perfectly preserved in desert darkness for nearly 2 millennia. These weren't ordinary scrolls. They were copies of sacred texts, including books we know and others we were never meant to. They became known as the Dead Sea Scrolls, a kind of time capsule of forbidden faith. Some scrolls matched the Old Testament, but others, they told a different story. There were early versions of the Book of Enoch and Jubilees, both absent from most modern Bibles. There were commentaries, mystical writings, community rules, prophetic visions, texts that had been purged from mainstream religion, but preserved by a small sect, the Essenes, an apocalyptic Jewish group that believed they were the true guardians of divine knowledge. Their writings spoke of a war between light and darkness, cosmic cycles, secret angelic hierarchies, and spiritual truths hidden from the masses. These weren't just theological ramblings, they were blueprints for an alternate version of history, one that emphasized personal transformation, hidden knowledge, and a coming age where truth would be revealed only to those who sought it beyond the surface. But here's the mystery. Not all of the scrolls have been released. For decades after their discovery, access to the Dead Sea Scrolls was tightly controlled by a small group of scholars, some of whom were connected to religious institutions that had the most to lose from their contents being made public. The official reason? They were delicate, hard to translate, incomplete. But critics argue that the delay was deliberate, that some scrolls contain narratives so disruptive, so contradictory to church doctrine, they were locked away to preserve not truth, but control. Even today, some fragments remain unpublished, untranslated, or quietly archived. What secrets do they hold? A different Genesis? A different Messiah? Or perhaps a different idea of what it means to be divine? And here's the deeper question. If these scrolls were preserved in secret for nearly 2,000 years, in caves, in jars, in silence, then what else is still hidden? What knowledge remains buried, not in sand, but in systems? The Dead Sea Scrolls are more than archaeological finds. They're a message, a warning, proof that truth can survive even centuries of censorship if someone is brave enough to find it and read it. And maybe, just maybe, we're the generation meant to hear it. Section 4, the last page they never let you read. The truth was never lost. It was hidden, buried in caves, torn from canon, whispered about in secret, but not lost. And now it's resurfacing. These forbidden books challenge everything we've been taught to accept about God, about power, about who gets to speak, and who's told to stay silent. They weren't banned because they were false. They were banned because they were freeing. So now the question isn't just why were they erased? It's what else have we been told to forget? Let us know in the comments. Which of the 7 books do you think holds the greatest truth? And are there others you believe we still haven't uncovered? Like, subscribe, and hit the bell if this video opened a new door for you. Because we're only getting started, and the books we weren't allowed to read may be the ones we need most right now. And when you're ready to keep going, watch Missing 411, Strange Disappearances No One Can Explain. Another mystery buried in plain sight, with questions no one seems willing to answer. Until next time, this has been Necessary Evil Entertainment, reminding you to be good or be good at it. Thanks for watching.